This is Alex, and welcome to Barely Braided, where we're taking a deep dive into foster care, adoption, and all things parenting, even the sticky stuff. Welcome to episode 11, which is actually episode 2 in our quarantine series, which actually isn't a thing. And it's our very first remotely recorded podcast. And I know some states are lifting the stay-at-home orders coming up here shortly. Most counties here in Tennessee will see a little bit of reopening towards the end of this week. But for us here in Davidson County, we are still isolated. But I have a really fun guest today. He is coming to us all the way from the great state of Illinois. Shout out to NIU. That's actually where my husband went to school, so go Huskies. This gentleman's name is Corey Taylor. He is an unmarried 22-year-old foster dad. He's the oldest of 3 children. He grew up in Alton, Illinois, which is just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, if you're not familiar. After high school, he moved to St. Charles, Missouri, where he began college and dropped out after 3 semesters to begin working. In 2018, he found himself desperate to leave his office job at a vehicle repossession company, so he left to accept a job working in graphic design, which he is still doing today, and he says he's still loving, and that sounds like a really cool job. At age 20, which is not that long ago for him, he bought his first house and moved back to Alton. He admits that time was really scary for him dropping out of college. He didn't have a backup plan. He was moving out all on his own, but it allowed him to start his journey in foster care. He became a foster parent in August of last year, and he's since had 2 placements, one of which is still with him now. He enjoys reading, hiking, crocheting, which he says is a long story, and I definitely want to hear more about that. Spending time with his huge extended family. So I would like to give the biggest hello and the biggest virtual hug / handshake to Mr. Corey Taylor. Welcome, Corey.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Good. So, okay, in your intro, you mentioned crocheting, and I know I'm kind of catching you off guard because we didn't talk about this earlier, but I need to hear about this crocheting hobby.
Yeah, so in the 3rd grade, we in art class did finger crocheting, which is really tacky looking. And my grandma, my dad's mom, she knew how to crochet, and she wanted to teach me how to crochet for real. And so I went to her house after school, and we looked at all her crocheting stuff, but she couldn't find her crochet hooks. And she said that she would come back and find them, and then we could learn together. And then it just never happened. And then she passed away in my freshman year of high school, the 2nd month of my freshman year. And then I at that point had forgotten about this whole thing. But this year, I don't remember what happened, but a random crocheting video popped up on my newsfeed, and it reminded me of her, and all the way back in the 3rd grade, and her wanting to teach me and being so excited about it, and then it never happening. And I was like, I'm going to learn how to crochet for her memory. And so I've been doing that. I think I started in January, but I'm not entirely sure if that's correct. And her sister, my aunt, bought me all this stuff, all my starting stuff, and we started crocheting together. So
that's awesome. What do you make?
2 months later, the most of the stuff that I've made has been hats because they're really easy and quick. I made a few stuffed animals too, though.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and for my first placement, when he was getting ready to leave, I crocheted him a blanket, like a twin size blanket, for him to keep. And then I made it like a smaller version for myself so that we had something matching for him and me.
Wow, that is so thoughtful. I absolutely love that. I'm really glad I asked you about that.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, first things first, I have a ton of questions for you. So what initially made you decide to become a foster parent? Is it like something that you've always wanted to do? And have you considered biological children?
So I didn't ever really think about being a foster parent. I've always known that I wanted to be a parent in general, like since I was little. But at this point in my life, I'm not married and I don't have any plans on getting married. And I still wanted children. So after I bought my house, I enjoyed it like for a full year of just being out on my own and being by myself. And then I was like, I felt like I didn't have a purpose, that I was just, every day was so boring and dull. I was going to work, coming home, spending the afternoon with myself and not really doing anything. So I had a spare bedroom and it was full of junk. And I was just praying and I said, give me something to do. Give me something to do with my life. And immediately the thought of foster care just popped in my head. It was nothing I had ever thought of doing. So I ignored it for a few weeks and it just kept, like, I couldn't sleep at night. It was just so intrusive, that thought of foster care over and over again. And so finally I looked up like what foster care was, just to like stick my toe in the water. And that I think by a month had passed and I had contacted like a local foster care, I don't know exactly what it's called, like an organization that matches potential parents to agencies that would fit their needs. And I got matched and I said, I'll wait until, so this was like in the beginning of March of 2019. And I said, I'll wait until this summer to actually like move forward. And I called them back, I think 2 weeks later and said, never mind, let's just do this. And so I got like the beginning stuff done. And just from that point on, it's just been moving so fast.
So you just jumped right in, feet first.
Right in. Yep.
I love that. That's awesome. I've talked about this in a previous episode, but one of my resolutions for 2020 was to pay attention to like the signs around me and my intuition and my gut a little more often. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's definitely like a gut thing. It's just something that's meant to be. Mm-hmm. That is Definitely. So cool. So you mentioned that you work as a graphic designer, and I know there are many foster parents that do work and there are many that don't work. But as a working single foster parent, how do you juggle everything?
It's definitely hard. But the good thing is I work for a small business and we're like a family. And so they're very supportive of this. They were so excited when I told them that I was doing this. And when I got my first placement, I mean, I had to take some days off to, go meet him and pick him up and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't even ask, or they didn't make me ask for time off. They told me take the day off or whatever. So that was really helpful. And I just have to find good after school programs, which is again hard when you're dealing with kids in foster care because there's so much prejudice out there. I was shocked with the things that I've been told by after school programs and everything. But really, you just have to have a job that supports what you're doing. And if they don't, then it's going to make it a lot harder to do this on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right that your job does need to be supportive. And it sounds like you have a very supportive job, and I do too. So we're very lucky. But during the quarantine or the isolation period, are you working from home? Are you not working? Or what's the story there?
I'm not working. We have like Illinois, I think it was Illinois, gave us like payroll protection. So I'm still getting paid full time, but I'm not actually working. So I'm definitely grateful for it, and I don't take it for granted because I know so many people that aren't working and aren't getting paid. And I'm just using this time to be grateful that I can stay home. And especially with this placement that came to me during the quarantine, it's been really, really helpful in allowing us to bond more.
Yeah, that is great. Do you do any sort of homeschooling right now?
A little bit. So he's in kindergarten, and I didn't get anything from his last school as far as schoolwork on a daily basis. So I've been trying to just like read books with him and do math problems, but more so just learning as we go, not like any kind of structured learning time.
Okay, cool. So in Illinois, is school canceled for the rest of the year? Or so will he start as a first grader in the fall?
Yeah, he'll start as a first grader in the fall.
Okay, cool. So I know in each state it's different. Some states you are allowed to be licensed directly through the state, and other states you have to be licensed through an agency. What does that look like in Illinois?
So you can be licensed through the state, which is DCFS here, or you can be licensed through an agency. It doesn't matter. So each agency, including DCFS, they have like a rotating, I don't know exactly what they call it, but when a child comes into care, it rotates who gets that child in their agency. So for one child, they could immediately go to DCFS, and another child could immediately go to an agency. That's how they deal with that. I think the only big pro of going with an agency here in Illinois is this extra support that you get from having an agency. With my agency, they're right down the street. So if I ever needed something, or even if I have to go in and give them paperwork or anything like that, they're 5 minutes away. And that's the biggest plus for me. Other than that, I don't think there's much of a difference.
Okay. Yeah, I hear some similarities and some differences. A lot of that is similar as far as you can choose to be licensed through DCS, or here I guess we just call it DCS,
Yeah.
or you can be licensed through an agency. But the difference I heard is when it comes to placement. So in Tennessee, all placements start at DCS, and DCS will try to place the children. And then if they are unable, the child will go to an agency, depending on, like, some agencies specialize in like certain types of conditions that children may have, or medically fragile children, or some agencies may specialize in teenagers or babies or whatever. And so the placement goes to an agency depending on the specifics of the child. So it's interesting how there are some differences and some similarities.
Yeah, definitely.
So in Illinois, what does the foster parent licensing and the training look like?
So the licensing for me, my original licensing worker, because it changes, which we'll get to that later, she came to my house and we just went through all of that paperwork about the fire escape plan, or smoke detectors and water temperature and all that kind of stuff, and just went through that really fast. And then she gave me all the paperwork to go get fingerprinted and background checked, which I did that same day. And then after all of that paperwork, it was just waiting for a training to open up near me. So I think, I did the paperwork in May, I think, and then the next class wasn't until August. So I just had to wait. Nothing happened in that. They said that the background check and fingerprinting process would take between 6 and 10 months, I think, and mine came back in less than 30 days, so that was a big plus. But
so definitely no intense criminal background on you if they found it that quickly.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Then the actual class, there's 9 classes and they're 2 hours long, I think. It was 3 hours, 6 to 9. And you can do them online or you can do them in person. My original agency didn't allow us to do it online, and I'm glad that they didn't, because I would have missed out on so much if I had just done it online at home by myself. My 2 trainers that I met through this were amazing and still are today. I can text them whenever I want and say, hey, I don't understand this aspect of foster care. Can you explain this to me? And they will. I mean, they're so great. And then all the friends that I made that are in the same process as me now, because I don't know very many foster parents. The only really foster parents I'm close to are the ones that became foster parents because they met me. So, but at this point, I didn't know anybody. So it was really great to meet all these people who I'm still friends with today. But it was 9 3-hour-long classes, and then an additional 10 hours were online that you do at home, which were so boring but important at the same time.
I love that you're inspiring people to become foster parents. I mean, because that's really what it's about, is spreading the word and, hopefully allowing people who are able to open their homes as foster parents, because the need is definitely there. I can pretty confidently say in any state or any area where you live. So I love that you're inspiring people to open their homes. That's great.
Yeah.
So another thing that I know varies from state to state is who can watch your foster children on a short-term basis, like as a babysitter if you have something to do during the day or need to go out at night. Are your babysitters required to have any additional training?
They are not. In Illinois, we have what's called the reasonable and prudent parenting standard, which just means that if I would let my biological child do something, then I can let my foster child do something without written permission from the agency or from the state. So things like sleepovers, before this standard was passed, the foster parent would have to get the names, date of birth, and social security numbers of the parents that lived in the home where the sleepover was happening, which basically meant that foster kids just never went to sleepovers because no one wants to ask for that information, and when asked, no one's going to give that information. So they just didn't get approved. So I think that was the big thing that led to the change, was that foster kids were missing out on things that every other child experiences in childhood. Also, before this, we couldn't leave the state, which in my county, which is the metropolitan area of a city that's in a different state, was extremely difficult. I mean, our field trips for school are in Missouri. When we go to the zoo or any kind of museum or anything, it's always in Missouri. So every single time we would have to send off like a permission slip or whatever to the state and wait weeks for it to come back, which meant that oftentimes things like that got missed because it just didn't come back in time. So now that we have this prudent parenting standard, we can make those decisions ourselves as the foster parents.
Tennessee also practices the prudent parenting, and I'm with you. I think it's a really good decision. It's a good thing to do. And basically, the gist of it, how they explained it to us, is kind of basically how you explained it. Treat your foster children just as you would any biological or adopted children, just as you would any other children in your home. And it makes a lot of sense to me, too.
Yeah, so I think I got a little off topic there, but to answer the original question, anybody can watch my foster children. So my parents or cousins, aunts, uncles, as long as I trust them with them, then I can make that decision for myself.
Cool. Okay. So related to that, what are the social media guidelines? Because I know sometimes they allow you to post photos of your foster children on social media and sometimes they don't. What does that look like for you?
In Illinois, we can post pictures and names of the foster kids in our care. We just cannot identify them as being in care. So this is another aspect of the prudent parenting because kids weren't in family photos or things like that. So we can take group photos and have everybody in it. We just can't identify who's a foster child and who's not.
Cool. Yeah, that's similar to Tennessee. Yeah. Okay. So switching gears just a little bit, what did your family and friends think about your decision to become a foster parent, and has that changed since you have become approved?
Yes, my parents thought I was a little crazy at first when I told them. My mom said that she needed a few days to process what I was saying to her.
Oh my goodness.
I gave her some space on it. And they were supportive the entire time. They just kept bringing me back to reality and saying, have you thought about this? Which I need because I'm like the person with his head in the clouds and I don't have anybody to keep me grounded. So that's where my parents are for me. But they've been really supportive. And since I've had kids in my home, they've been amazing grandparents to them. And like having them come over for sleepovers and all that. Not with the current one because we've been in quarantine during his entire stay with me, but with my previous placement. So my brother and his wife, about a week before classes started, told me to pump the brakes with it. They didn't think that I was ready or that I should start doing this yet. But after my first placement came and they spent some time with him and everything and saw what I was doing, they have become so supportive of what I'm doing. And yeah, they've just been a great aunt and uncle and a great support for me. And then I do have some family members who just kind of ignore that I'm doing this. They don't engage with it. If I post something on Facebook about foster care, they ignore it or things like that, which hurts. But I'm not doing this for them. And so I just have to see it how it is and just do what I'm doing for the kids.
Yeah, it is really tough as a foster parent when you expect somebody that's a member of your support system to like really engage in your journey and be involved and be a part of it, and they're not quite as willing. I think we all foster parents have experienced that from some support member. And it is tough, but I mean, you know, you can't make people be excited for you in your journey. So
that was the thing. It was like, I'm so excited about what I'm doing and I'm so in love with these kids. And then to see people just not care that they lived with me or not care that they're around is so disappointing. But I mean, I have so many other people that are excited about them. So I just have to focus on that.
And foster care is such a huge part of a foster parent's life. I mean, it's bringing a child into your home and completely flipping your world upside down. So it's a huge decision. It's a huge life changer.
Yeah.
As a foster parent, how do you like to be supportive, or how would you hope that your friends and family members could support you?
Yeah, so I wrote in here that I think when we're talking about supporting foster parents or people in general, we just need to stop asking them directly, is there anything I can do to support you? Because I know that 9 times out of 10, when someone asks me that question, I see it as a formality. I also see it as like, I don't know how to answer the question. I don't want to come off as asking for charity, I don't want to overthink it, because I will overthink it. Like, did I just ask too much? Is that what they meant when they said, how can I support you? Or was I going way off topic there? And so I think the best way for people to support people who are fostering is to say, hey, I want to bring over dinner tonight. What would you like? That way you're still giving them an option, but the option isn't whether I'm going to help you or not. You are helping them. And so that's like been the biggest help for me, is when people say, hey, I'm going to get you a gift card for dinner this week. What place would you like, or what type of food would you like?
I absolutely 100% agree with that. If you're somebody who would like to support a foster parent, I think the key is to just be specific, make a specific offer, but give the foster parent a little bit of choice in it. Like you said, I'm wanting to bring you dinner. What's your favorite meal? Or where can I pick up, drive through from? Or I'm planning on sending you a gift card. What's your favorite restaurant to eat dinner, or something like that? I 100% agree with that. I love that.
And I wrote on my blog, I think it was on my blog, it was either there or my Facebook page, about aggressive kindness. So I was at Aldi one time, and there was like a little old lady in front of me, and she was like, oh, do you want to go ahead of me? I think I only had 2 things in my hand, and she had a whole cart. And I was like, no, go ahead. And she's like, I didn't ask you a question. You're going to go ahead of me. And that is the kind of support that I think we need in foster care, is just, I'm going to help you. I don't care what you say, but I need to know what you want.
I love that. I mean, we can implement that in our daily lives for foster parents, non-foster parents. Anybody can implement that. I love that. Yeah. That is so funny. So is there anything that you wish you would have known going into becoming a foster parent that you know now?
I really wish I had known how important it is to be structured from the beginning. I gave a lot of leniency with my first placement when he first came here, because I was just trying so hard for him to like me. And I realize now that he would have liked me a lot more if I wasn't such a pushover at first.
Oh,
if
that's
I just
funny.
said, these are the rules, this is what we're doing today. Just go through and say, this is what I expect of you in my house. There's no room for any confusion or lenient like that. You're allowing a certain level of misbehavior because they don't know what to expect from you. So I just wish I had been better at that at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. And so many of these children, especially the older children who come into foster care, I've found have not had structure. They haven't had rules. And so when you start to implement structure and schedules and rules and expectations, they actually respond really well, and they begin to trust you more and respect you more. And you just build a closer bond that way.
Yeah.
So what are some difficulties you've experienced or struggles in foster care?
The biggest difficulty has been just the prejudice and the stereotyping that I see from people towards foster kids and what they expect foster kids to do. I mean, I've had people call them kids like them, or, kids like them don't really know how to behave yet, so we have to teach them. Or when one after school program found out that he was in foster care, the guy was like, oh, now that makes a lot more sense. And I realized in that moment that he didn't know any more about my child in that moment of finding out that he was in foster care than he did 30 seconds prior. But it made everything so much worse when he found out, because he started looking for the misbehavior. He started expecting it to happen. And so every little tiny thing that he did was turned into a mountain. He was put under a magnifying glass because they were like, oh, this kid's going to make a mistake, so we need to stay on top of him. And then it was like they were suffocating him. That's the biggest thing that I've seen that has made this difficult is trying to stand up for these kids when people don't expect anything but the worst from them.
Yeah, I experienced similar when we were considering foster care or adoption for infants. We're open to all ages at this point, but at one time I remember somebody said to me, oh, you don't want a drug baby in your home.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, this child didn't ask to be brought into the world, much less brought into the world with any sort of, drugs in their system or, things that could hinder their development or their learning in the future. I mean, they didn't ask for any of this. They deserve, just as much, if not more, compassion and love than any other child that exists.
Yeah.
It is sad.
When I went to meet my first placement, because I met him before he came to live with me, someone said to me, well, maybe you could just do a trial run and then see how it goes. And I didn't say anything to this person, but I was thinking, this is a human child who doesn't have a home. At this point, he did not have any home. And he doesn't deserve a trial run because he deserves a home. He's a human being. And so many times people just look past that. They see all these other things and they forget that these are little kids that we're talking about.
Yep. What's your favorite part about being a foster parent?
The best part for me is watching these kids who are so scared and emotionally sheltered just become kids again for the first time in so long. The first time they laugh or smile is so rewarding to me. It makes every single meltdown and tantrum and angry word disappear.
So I have a confession to make. I read a little bit of your blog because I was interested, and the part that really stood out to me is talking about a moment that you had with one of your foster children. I'm not sure if it was your first placement or your second placement, but you were just describing the feeling of this child entering that state of like trust and happiness and joy. Yeah. And I just wanted to tell you that your writing was beautiful. It was wonderful. And yeah, I would love to go back and read the rest of the blog and the rest of your posts. And I would encourage the listeners to do the same because it was really, really good.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you said you have one placement right now. Are you currently open to more placements?
Yeah, I say that I'm always accepting new placements. And in between of my first and second, there was about a month where I didn't have any placement. And in that period of time, I think I would have said yes to anybody as long as I felt like I could handle it, because as a single parent, I can't do like someone who needs 24-hour medical care or anything like that, but just say yes to everything. And now with another kid in my home, I have to be open to placements, but now consider what he can handle and what I can handle. And so now I just had to be a little bit more picky if they were to call me with a placement. But yeah, I would always accept another placement if someone needed me to.
Cool. In Illinois, are you approved for like a certain number of placements at one time?
Yeah, so I have a 2-bedroom house. And so I can only have 2 kids in that bare bedroom, and they both have to be the same gender.
Okay, cool. So if you were to accept another placement, it would have to be same gender. Would it have to be like around the same age, or does Illinois not require like an age restriction?
I don't think there's an age restriction, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay, cool. So if any of your foster... No, go ahead.
There is an age restriction if they're opposite genders. So if I had like a 2-year-old and an infant who are a boy and a girl, they could share the room, but only until they got to a certain age, which I think is like school age.
Okay.
Then they would have to separate.
Okay. Yeah, all of that sounds very similar. I'm thinking Illinois and Tennessee are very similar when it comes to foster care. Mm-hmm. So if any of your foster care placements led to adoption, would you continue to accept placements after that, or are you open to adoption at all?
Yes, I would be open to adoption. I just have to know that the placement is right, because I did say no to adoption once, and I knew that was the wrong decision would be to adopt, which was the most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking decision and text that I ever had to send to say no to a caseworker. But if I felt like an adoption was a good fit in that we made a good pair, then yeah, I would be open to adoption. And then after adoption, I do see myself continuing to foster, again, as long as I felt like the child in my home could handle it, because some kids just can't handle being a sibling. And I've seen that in foster care where they just need all this attention. Anyway, I would consider continuing to foster after I adopted, as long as I felt like I could find a placement that fit in with the home that I had.
Cool.
Yes.
Cool. So when it comes to conversations with your foster children about their biological families, how does that go, and how do you plan to navigate that as your foster children grow and get older?
So with my first foster placement, he was older. He was 10 when he came to me, and then he turned 11 while he was here. And he still had vivid memories of his mother. And so he talked about her often. And so I made sure that I talked about her often by just reading his signs. If I could tell that he was missing her in a moment, I would try to figure out what could be triggering that, whether it was a song that was playing on the radio or food that I was cooking or something. And I would try to just talk to him about her casually, and not try to make a big deal about it, but just try to see if he would be willing to talk about her. I also tried to find pictures of her wherever I could. And like at bedtime or things like that, I would show him pictures of her and have him talk about her and just say what he missed about her. With the placement that's currently in my home, he doesn't remember his birth mom. And so it's a little bit different with him because it's hard because I've never met her and I don't know what she looks like or anything like that. So I know in Pride class, we would talk about, like, just say, oh, I can see that you have the same smile as your mom or things like that, which I would love to be able to do those kinds of things too. I just don't know what she looks like. And then as they get older, I would just try to include them in every conversation possible and just remind them that even though they don't live with their birth parents, that they were still loved by their birth parents. And just try to keep the conversation open so that they never felt like they had to be ashamed of where they came from.
Yeah, I think it's pretty universal at this point that all of the training includes being like open and honest with foster children and adopted children and giving them the truth about the fact that they may have been adopted or that they're in foster care or whatever, and just being really transparent about that. Because I feel like many years ago, an adopted person not knowing that they were adopted happened so much more frequently. And it seems like it doesn't really happen like that anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know I have a lot of listeners who are kind of on the fence about maybe becoming foster parents or starting the training. Do you have any advice for them?
Yes. I would say that the first step, if you're on the fence about doing it, is just to go to an informational meeting. Here in Madison County, we have the Restore Network, which puts on a 101 class once a month. So if you can find something like that in your area, that would be that's like a great way to get your foot in the door and just see what it's like. Past that, if I can do this, then so can you. So any kind of excuse that you have for why it's not the perfect timing for you, just to say it bluntly, is bullcrap. Because, I've heard so many excuses for why people don't do this. And some of them are legitimate, but so many of them are just fear of opening up your home and opening up your heart for somebody that might leave. That's the biggest one, of being attached, or, everyone says that they would get too attached. And everyone in the foster care world knows that that is not a good reason not to do this. So yeah, I would just say, just have an open mind and don't let fear stop you from doing something that you know is right.
I love that. And you have such a cool story. I was so glad that you're able to join me and kind of go through these questions and give us a little bit of an insight into your world. I have one last question for you, and that is, if one of my listeners wanted to contact you after the podcast is over, how can they get in touch?
So my main social media would just be my blog, which is justonedad.home.blog. And all of my other social media and contact information is on that website on the Let's Chat page. And I'm always ready and willing to answer questions and then give advice when I can, or just listen to you vent, because I know we all need to vent every once in a while and not everyone has someone to vent to. And if you do look at my Facebook or Instagram that's linked there, it's going to look pretty empty, but hopefully they'll have content there too soon.
Well, that's awesome. Like I said earlier, I did read through your blog and it's the best. I would definitely recommend checking it out because it's really, really good. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I know a lot of listeners have told me that they really enjoy hearing stories about others, and yours is really unique, and it's really important being a voice for other foster dads and young people in general. So I am really glad that you're able to join me and kind of tell us your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. The best way for our listeners to support our growing community of foster and adoptive parents is to help spread real, reliable, and raw information. So sharing this podcast with friends or family members who might be interested in fostering or adopting would mean a lot to me, and I hope it would be super helpful to them as well. I do want to give a big thanks to Ruben Andrews. He is this week's podcast editor. And of course, a big thank you to you, Corey. I really, really enjoyed hanging out with you today.
I did too.
All right. Have a good week, and we will talk to you later.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.